Donovan Reeves was 39 years old, a senior operations director who had spent 14 years making sure other people's work ran cleanly and on time. He drove a 6-year-old black Tahoe with a cracked phone mount held together by electrical tape he'd never gotten around to replacing. He kept a small notebook in his jacket pocket. Not for ideas, for things he needed to remember exactly. On a Thursday evening in late November, he walked into a corporate dinner he hadn't wanted to attend, ordered sparkling water, and stood near the back of the room the way he always stood, watching the room more than he was part of it. A woman he had never met turned from her conversation, looked at him, and decided something. She lifted her glass. She emptied it onto his jacket. Not by accident, not in shock. She looked him in the eye while she did it. Then she turned back to her group and said something that made two of them laugh. She had no idea what she had just done. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The restaurant was all dark wood and low light, the kind of room where the noise level is calibrated to feel like exclusivity. Donovan had been there 11 minutes, long enough to know the room, identify the firm's managing partners near the window, and find the one person he'd actually come to speak to. A regional VP who had asked for his feedback on a structural reorganization that was about to go sideways if someone didn't say so clearly before the end of the fiscal quarter. He had not come to be seen. He came with a specific purpose. He had done this long enough to know the difference. Donovan Reeves had spent 14 years moving between roles that had no obvious title, the kind of work that makes a company function without making it into a brochure. He had started as a site foreman at 23, earned a civil engineering degree at night over 5 years, and moved into operations management the way you move into anything you're suited for, quietly, one decision at a time, until one day the scope of your responsibility is simply larger than it used to be. He had no corner office. He preferred not to. He had a desk near a window that faced a parking structure, and on clear mornings the light came in at an angle he liked. He was not flashy. He was not well known outside of the people who needed to know him. He wore the same kind of dress shoes he'd worn for years. Dark, plain, cared for. He kept his suit simple. He looked, to people who hadn't been told, like a man who might work in finance. Possibly an analyst, possibly someone's quiet assistant. That was fine. He had learned early that being underestimated was a kind of leverage if you had the patience to hold it. His mother had told him once, when he was about 16 and frustrated about something he couldn't even remember now, "Donovan, let them see you when you're ready to be seen." He had thought about that line more times than he could count. He had been standing near the back of the room for 11 minutes when the woman appeared to his left. Her name was Cassidy Marsh. She was 31 years old, 2 years into a junior account management position at a firm that shared a parent company with the one Donovan worked for. She had shoulder-length dark hair and the kind of professional confidence that lands on a person in their late 20s, when you've survived enough to believe you've seen enough. She was mid-sentence in a conversation with 2 colleagues, a man and a woman who both worked for her same firm, and she was gesturing with a glass of red wine in her right hand. What happened next was quick. She turned, stepped slightly to the left, and Donovan was in that space. His arm was at his side. Her glass connected with his wrist, tilted, and in the space between a tipping and a decision, she finished the motion. She looked directly at him and completed the pour. The wine went across the front of his jacket. A dark stain, fully visible, spreading. She looked at him. Not startled. Not apologetic. She had a half-second to decide what kind of person to be, and she made her choice without hesitation. "Watch where you're standing," she said. Her colleague, the man, let out a short sound that was almost a laugh. Donovan looked down at his jacket, then at her. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for napkins in a panic. He did not perform outrage. He simply looked at her the way he looked at things when he was deciding what to do with them. Steady, measuring, unhurried. "My apologies," he said. Then he turned and walked toward the far end of the bar. He could hear her behind him, already explaining to her group what had happened. Her version of it, the one where she had been jostled, where it had been inevitable, where his response confirmed something she'd already decided about him. He didn't look back. He used 2 cocktail napkins on the jacket, enough to address the surface. He ordered a club soda. He set the napkins down. He noticed, without letting it register visibly, that one of the men in her group had watched the whole exchange and had not laughed. He had a rectangular event badge on a lanyard. Donovan filed that away the way he filed things, without deciding yet what it meant. The regional VP found him near the window 20 minutes later. They had a 17-minute conversation about the reorganization. Donovan gave him 3 specific structural concerns and 1 clear recommendation. The VP thanked him, genuinely, and suggested they schedule a formal briefing before the holiday break. Donovan drove home that night with a stained jacket on the passenger seat and a quiet sense that the evening had contained more than it appeared to. He was not wrong. 3 weeks before that dinner, Donovan had been asked to take on a project that changed the shape of his work significantly. The company he was employed by, Callaway Infrastructure Group, a mid-sized firm with operations in 7 states, had begun a strategic acquisition of a smaller regional consulting company called Meridian Partners. Meridian was the firm that Cassidy Marsh worked for. It was the firm where she managed junior accounts. It was a firm that, as of 47 days before that Thursday dinner, had technically ceased to exist as an independent entity and was now a wholly owned subsidiary of Callaway. Donovan had been appointed as the senior operations lead for the integration. That meant he had authority over structure, staffing, workflow alignment, and, in coordination with HR and legal, the identification of any positions that would be consolidated, elevated, or removed during the transition. He had signed the non-disclosure documentation on a Tuesday morning. He had said nothing about it to anyone outside the necessary parties. He did not discuss it at the Thursday dinner because a corporate event was not the place to discuss it, and because he did not discuss things at events, that was not where he worked. He had driven to that dinner to speak to one person about one thing, and he had done that. Before all of it, there had been an evening about 6 weeks prior when a colleague, a woman named Priscilla, who ran internal communications at Callaway and had known Donovan for 9 years, had looked at him across a conference table and said, "When the dust settles, you're going to be the most important person no one knows about." He'd told her she was being generous. She'd said she wasn't. He had not thought much of it at the time. He filed it away the way he filed things. That was what Cassidy Marsh hadn't understood. Not because she'd had any reason to, but it would matter, in ways she had not yet begun to account for. Her name was Audrey Callaway Wells. She was 64 years old, the company's senior vice president of human resources, a woman with short silver hair, posture that had not changed since she was 40, and a habit of meeting bad news with total stillness. She had worked at Callaway for 22 years. She had known Donovan for 11 of them. She had watched him from a distance, then from a corridor, then from across a table, then from the adjoining office she'd had assigned so they could work through the Meridian integration quickly and precisely. She had been watching since the integration began, watching the new staff file in for orientation. watching the onboarding sessions, watching which of the Meridian employees took the adjustments seriously and which ones hadn't quite understood yet that the air around them had changed. She had not said anything about the dinner incident to Donovan immediately. Not because she didn't know, because she had been waiting to understand the full context before deciding what needed to happen. She called him at 7:14 on a Monday morning, 2 days after the dinner. "Come in before the others," she said. "I have something to show you." Her office was on the 4th floor, east-facing. The morning light came through the blinds in clean horizontal lines. She had coffee ready. She had a folder on the desk. She did not open it immediately. "Tell me about Thursday," she said. He told her. Concisely, he described the incident, the exchange, the woman's name as best he could identify it. He told her about the badge he'd noticed and the man who hadn't laughed. Audrey listened to all of it without moving. Then she nodded once. "Her name is Cassidy Marsh," she said. "She's been with Meridian for 2 years, account management, junior level." She reached for the folder. She was at that dinner because her direct manager brought her as a guest. She doesn't know yet what the integration means for her team's structure. Most of them don't. She opened the folder. She laid it flat on the desk between them. "I'm going to tell you what I found when I reviewed the onboarding materials and the incident log from the past 2 weeks. I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything." Donovan set down his coffee. He nodded. The first page was an integration compliance form with a flagged item. 3 days before the dinner, Cassidy Marsh had filed a workplace comment through the internal system, a framing complaint, oblique, attributing a decision she disagreed with to someone without the authority to be making those calls. She had named the department. She had not named the individual, but the department was Donovan's. She hadn't known the complaint would route upward. She hadn't known the system she was filing into was the new Callaway system, not the old Meridian one. She hadn't known, yet, what the integration had changed. "There's more," Audrey said. She turned to the second document, a transcript of a comment captured during a Monday team meeting, one of the integration orientation sessions, recorded as standard procedure. A voice identified as Marsh, Cassidy had said, in response to a question about the new operations chain, "I just think whoever they're sending over from Callaway needs to understand how things actually run. The people they put in charge over there are usually just middle management with nicer offices." Several people in the room had laughed. Donovan looked at the transcript for a moment. He did not say anything. He picked up his coffee. He set it back down. "Who was in that room?" he asked. 14 people. 8 from Meridian. 6 Callaway. 2 of the 6 were from my department. She paused. One of them was Marcus Hill. He recognized the name. Marcus Hill was Audrey's deputy, a precise and thorough man who had been at Callaway for 6 years and who documented everything as a matter of professional habit. Donovan looked at Audrey. She opened the third document. It was a diagram, a simple organizational chart, the kind used in integration planning. It showed the new Callaway Meridian structure. At the top of the operations branch, in the senior director position, was Donovan Reeves. Below it were 4 regional leads. Below one of those leads, 3 layers down, was a small box. Inside it, Marsh, C, Junior Account Manager, Meridian Legacy. "She's 3 rungs below the person who reports to your direct report," Audrey said. She did not make a face. She did not add anything to it. She just let the chart sit there. Donovan stood over the desk the way he stood over blueprints on a job site, not looking at any single piece, looking at all of it together. The complaint, the comment in the meeting room, The wine on his jacket, poured with intention by a woman who believed she was looking at someone who didn't belong in the room. He could see the whole shape of it now, every line connecting to the next. "What do you want to do?" Audrey asked. He looked at the chart for a long moment. "What's the timeline on announcing the new org structure?" he asked. "End of the week. Full company communication, both teams." He nodded. "Then, nothing changes," he said. "We follow the timeline." She refilled his coffee. He didn't move fast. That was the part most people wouldn't have understood. Donovan spent the next 4 days doing exactly what the integration required. He sat in briefing meetings. He reviewed staffing assessments. He signed off on workflow documentation and provided structural feedback on 3 departmental consolidations. He was even tempered, specific, and thorough. He did not let what he knew change the shape of how he worked. He thought about the organizational chart twice. Once on Tuesday evening, driving home, when he passed the restaurant and glanced at it without meaning to. Once on Wednesday morning, looking at the diagram again in the context of the full structure, not at the small box near the bottom, but at the whole design, the way the pieces fit together. He had spent his career understanding that systems work when the people inside them understand where they stand. When they don't, when someone misreads their position, their leverage, their actual relationship to the decision-making authority above them, things go sideways in ways that are always more expensive than they needed to be. He had seen this pattern more times than he could count. On job sites where a subcontractor assumed jurisdiction he didn't have. In logistics systems where a coordinator made calls that belonged to the person above them. In every case, the correction was the same. Clear communication, documented authority, proportional consequence. He wasn't angry. Anger was not a useful tool in this kind of situation. He had set it down somewhere between the bar and the parking lot that Thursday evening, folded it in half, and put it somewhere he didn't need to retrieve it from. On Thursday morning, Marcus Hill sent him a brief memo. It was 1 paragraph. It noted, in the kind of precise, documented language that Marcus used for everything, that the incident at the company dinner had been witnessed by 2 Callaway employees and 3 Meridian employees, that the individual responsible had been identified, and that the record had been noted in the integration's incident documentation, standard procedure for any conduct-relevant event occurring within the transition period. Donovan replied with 4 words. Noted. "Thank you, Marcus," he called Audrey at 4:30 that afternoon. "The org announcement is still scheduled for Friday?" he asked. 8 a.m., she said. "Company-wide communication. Both teams. I'd like to be the one to present the operations structure to the Meridian staff." A brief pause. "That's not standard," she said. "I know," he said. "Is there a reason it can't happen?" Another pause, shorter. "No," she said. "There isn't." They were quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that passes between people who have known each other long enough not to need to fill it. "She thinks this is already settled," Donovan said. "Not as a question. She thinks she's at the very beginning of figuring out what Callaway is," Audrey said. He thanked her. He ended the call. Donovan arrived at the Meridian offices at 7:42 in the morning. He liked arriving early. It gave him time to read the room before anyone was in it. The conference space was a long rectangle, glass on one side looking into the open plan work area. A presentation screen at the front. A long table with 12 chairs. 2 water pitchers and a row of glasses. The room smelled faintly of dry erase marker and recycled air. He stood at the front of the room for a few minutes. He looked at the building across the street through the window. He thought about nothing in particular. He was simply present. At 8:03, the Meridian account management team filed in, 11 people, including Cassidy Marsh, who came in near the back of the group with a coffee and a laptop under her arm. She glanced toward the front of the room, the way people glance at a presenter they haven't met. Briefly, categorically, she found a seat in the middle of the table, on the left side. Her laptop open, her expression settled into the politely attentive expression of someone sitting through a process they expect to be routine. She had not recognized him. He had expected that. Audrey came in at 8:06 and took a seat near the door. She did not look at Donovan. She set her portfolio on the table and uncapped her pen. Marcus Hill was standing near the back. Donovan introduced himself. "Good morning. My name is Donovan Reeves. I serve as Senior Director of Operations at Callaway Infrastructure Group. I'm here this morning because I'll be overseeing the operational integration of this team going forward, and I believe in being visible and direct about what that means for the people doing the work." He paused. Not for effect, because the next sentence required precision. "I want to walk you through the organisational structure as it applies to this team, and then I'd like to open it up for questions. Some of what you hear will be familiar from the materials you've already received. Some of it will be new." He began at the top of the chart. He was even and methodical. He did not rush. He moved down through the regional leads, the functional managers, the account management tiers. He explained what each layer was responsible for, what the reporting lines were, and what the integration timeline looked like for each level. He spent 2 minutes on the account management tier. He did not look at Cassidy Marsh specifically when he talked about it. He didn't need to. He kept his gaze distributed across the room the way you keep your attention distributed on a job site, everywhere, so that nothing is missed. But he knew the moment she understood. He had been watching for it. It arrived quietly, a small adjustment in her posture, a barely perceptible stillness, like a person who has just noticed that the floor beneath them is not where they expected it to be. Her eyes moved from the presentation screen to him, to his face. He met her gaze. Briefly, evenly, he continued. When the presentation was done, he opened the floor for questions. 3 people asked substantive questions, which he answered directly. One person asked about transition timelines, another about HR contacts for the new structure. Cassidy Marsh said nothing. When the room began to clear, she stayed seated. Audrey had not moved from her chair near the door. Marcus was still at the back. Donovan gathered the single folder he had brought. He straightened his jacket, a different jacket from Thursday, dark charcoal, crisp. He walked toward the door. He stopped. He turned back to the room. She was looking at him. He held that look for a moment. Not cold, not performative, just clear. "If any of you have questions about the structure or your place in it," he said, "my assistant can schedule time through the integration office." He paused. "The process is designed to be transparent. I'm available for it." He walked out. He heard Audrey behind him, saying something to the remaining staff in the warm, measured voice she used for these moments. He went down the stairwell and out the side exit. He stood in the cold air for a moment. The street was busy. A delivery truck was double parked. Someone was arguing on a phone half a block away. He went to his car. He drove back to Callaway. It did not happen all at once. It rarely does. The integration processed the way integrations process, in stages, over weeks, each phase generating documentation and decisions that accumulated into a final structure. Within the Meridian Account Management Group, a tier consolidation was announced in early January. 3 junior positions were determined to be redundant within the new structure. The consolidation was handled by HR through the standard process: performance record review, role evaluation, alignment with the new workflow design. Cassidy Marsh's position was evaluated, her performance record was reviewed. The complaint she had filed in November, the one that had routed through the new Callaway system without her understanding where it would land, was part of the record. She was not terminated. The framework did not operate that way, and that was not the point. She was offered a lateral reassignment to a different account team under a different regional structure with a different set of responsibilities. Whether she took it or not was her decision. She did not take it. Donovan was not present for that conversation. He was 2 floors away, reviewing a site operations report for a project in the Pacific Northwest. He had not asked for updates on her specific case. He did not need to. The structure he had helped build was functioning the way a well-designed structure functions, methodically, without requiring intervention, processing what it needed to process. 3 people from the Meridian team were elevated during the integration review. One of them was a logistics coordinator named James Osai, who had been at Meridian for 4 years in a role that was clearly undervalued for what it actually required. Donovan had noticed Osai in the Monday meeting. He had been the man who had not laughed. The one with the lanyard badge. He had filed that away. When the review came back, Osai's file was thorough. His record was clean and extensive. The recommendation to elevate his role had come from 3 separate evaluators independently. Donovan had countersigned the elevation without adding anything to it. The record spoke for itself. By March, the integration was formally complete. Donovan filed the summary report on a Tuesday morning, sent it to the executive team, and marked the project closed. He had 14 employees now. A 15th was starting in April. He answered every call the same day. He gave accurate timelines and hit them. On a clear evening in early April, Donovan was sitting on the back steps of his house in a neighborhood that had been quiet when he bought into it, and had stayed that way, which he appreciated. He had a glass of water. The light was doing the thing it does in spring, going warm and sideways, catching the tops of things. He had spoken to his mother that afternoon. She had asked how work was going. He had told her it was good. She had made a sound that was both satisfied and suspicious, which was her primary mode of communication with him, and which he'd come to understand was a form of love. He thought, briefly, about a Thursday evening in November, about a jacket, about a woman who had looked at him and made a fast, confident decision about who he was. He thought about the shape of what had followed, not with satisfaction, exactly, with the particular recognition of a man who has watched something proceed the way it was designed to. The structure had worked. The record had been accurate. The evaluation had been honest. The outcome had been proportional. No more than that. But exactly that. A car turned at the far end of the street and moved away. Somewhere behind the fence, his neighbour was doing something with a garden hose. A dog was barking 2 blocks over and then stopped. He finished his water. He went inside and turned out the light. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.